She wasn't supposed to be there that night. Not in the building of glass and steel that touched the clouds. Not in the heart of a company that promised to change the world. He slammed his palm against the table. If anyone can fix this thing, I'll give them $100 million. The words exploded from him like glass shattering. The room froze. A few nervous laughs flickered around the table, but everyone knew it wasn't a real offer. It was a scream of frustration from a man running out of time. Outside that room, a mop squeaked against the polished floor. Maria Morales, the night maid, flinched at the sound of shouting. For 8 years she had cleaned these halls, learning the rhythm of anger and ambition that filled them after dark. Tonight felt worse, heavier, louder. She sighed and pushed her cart forward, her reflection ghosting across the glass walls. Rich people arguing again, she muttered in Spanish. Beside her walked her 17-year-old daughter, Lina. Slim, bright-eyed, wearing a faded uniform 2 sizes too big. She had insisted on helping her mother during the summer break to earn some money for school. It was the machines. Everywhere she looked, Atlas Tech glittered with them. Screens that spoke, doors that breathed open, lights that moved when you did. As they reached the executive lab, Lina stopped. Through the glass she saw the A9 engine. A massive, humming shape covered in blue light. It looked less like a machine and more like a creature trying to stay alive. Wires pulsed softly, flickering like veins under skin. "What's that?" she whispered. Maria followed her gaze. "Some expensive robot. Don't get too close." Lina pressed her palm against the glass. "It looks like it's in pain." Her mother gave a tired laugh. "Machines don't feel pain, Mija. Come, we have more floors to clean." But Lina didn't move. Inside the lab, she could see men in suits throwing their hands in the air, a man slamming the table, and lights flashing red across screens. For a moment, she caught a glimpse of Richard's angry face through the window, the kind of man who had never once noticed the people who swept his floors. "Come, Lina," her mother said again, tugging her sleeve. Lina stepped back, eyes still locked on the silver sphere. "What if I could fix it?" she said quietly. Maria smiled weakly. "You can fix broken fans at home, yes. But this," she gestured toward the lab. "This thing costs more than everything we own." "I know," Lina said, still staring. "But it's still just wires and air, right? All machines need to breathe." Maria frowned. "You and your strange ideas. Let's go." They walked down the hall, the echo of their footsteps mixing with the fading anger from the conference room. As the elevator doors closed, Lina looked back one last time. The machine's blue light flickered, almost like an eye blinking. For a heartbeat, it felt alive. Maria sighed, wiping her forehead. "People like us, we clean their messes. We don't fix them." Lina didn't argue, but inside her chest, a small spark caught fire. Curiosity. The kind that never goes out once it starts to burn. That night, as the city slept beneath a sea of lights, a promise hung unspoken in the air. Someone the world ignored had just heard a challenge meant for gods and geniuses, and she wasn't about to forget it. The next night at Atlas Tech was quieter. The chaos of yesterday's shouting had drained into exhaustion. The engineers worked late, their eyes heavy, faces pale from the blue glow of screens. Somewhere between the wires and the coffee cups, hope had gone missing. But hope, as it often does, hides in strange places, sometimes in the hands of people no one ever notices. Maria Morales pushed her cleaning cart through the lab hallway, the faint sound of her rubber shoes echoing against the marble floor. Her daughter Lina walked beside her, tying her hair back with an elastic band that had lost most of its stretch. "Mama," Lina whispered, "do they ever go home?" Maria smiled faintly. "People like them don't rest. They chase big things. Money, fame, answers." Lina looked through the glass again. Inside, the engineers argued in front of the A9 engine, a huge, cold machine that looked both alive and dead at once. Its lights blinked unevenly, like a heartbeat that couldn't find its rhythm. Maria noticed her staring and nudged her shoulder. "Don't look too long, Mija. We have our own work." But Lina couldn't help herself. "It's strange, Mama," she said softly. Every night, I see them trying to fix that thing, but they never touch it with care. They poke it, they yell at it, they type things, but they never listen to it. Maria chuckled tiredly. Machines don't talk, my love. Lina tilted her head, her eyes reflecting the soft blue lights. Maybe not with words. Maria sighed and dipped her mop into the bucket. You're dreaming again. Lina smiled faintly. Dreaming doesn't cost money, right? Her mother laughed under her breath. Maybe that's why it's all we can afford. They moved into the lab area to empty bins and wipe tables. The smell of metal and burnt circuits hung in the air. The room was full of brilliant people, but none of them looked happy. They spoke in half-sentences and sighed in frustration, as if genius had turned against them. Lina watched one of the engineers slam his keyboard. It's not overheating because of the code, he shouted. It's a hardware issue. Another replied, the sensors say it's fine. We've checked everything. No, said a third. If it keeps crashing during phase 3, maybe it's a power surge. Their words blended into static. To Lina, it all sounded like noise. Complicated, clever noise. She wasn't sure what they were missing, but something about the A9's flickering lights bothered her. She didn't have their degrees, but she had something else. Instinct. The same instinct that told her when an old radio was about to die, or when her mother was hiding sadness behind a smile. As they finished cleaning, she whispered, Mama, why do they look at us like we don't exist? Maria stopped wiping the counter and looked at her. Because in their world, people like us are part of the furniture. Lina frowned. That's not fair. Her mother shrugged. Fair doesn't pay bills. The girl fell silent. The hum of machines filled the space between them. Then, suddenly, the A9 engine made a faint crackling sound, soft, almost like a cough. Everyone froze for a moment. One of the engineers groaned. Not again, he muttered, walking toward it. Lina watched closely. As the machine's lights dimmed again, she noticed something others didn't. A faint shimmer of heat coming from the base. Steam. The air vents were glowing faintly red. It's burning, she whispered. What did you say? Maria asked. Nothing, Lina said quickly. Just thinking out loud. Maria rolled her eyes. You and your thoughts. As they left the lab that night, Lina looked back once more. Through the glass, the machine looked like a giant holding its breath. She couldn't explain it, but she felt sorry for it. For the people yelling at it. For her mother cleaning up their mess. For herself always standing outside the glass. Inside, genius was failing loudly. Outside, a maid's daughter was listening quietly. And sometimes, quiet listening changes everything. The next morning, Atlas Tech woke up to more panic. The A9 engine had crashed again, this time in front of potential investors. Screens went black mid-presentation, lights flickered, and an acrid smell of smoke filled the air. The investors left in silence, their faces carved with disappointment. CEO Richard Hale slammed his office door behind him, his voice echoing down the corridor. 3 years, $300 million. And not one of you can fix a damn motor. No one answered. The team stood like statues. He looked at the whiteboard filled with equations and diagrams. You've all got degrees from the best universities, right? Then explain to me why my machine dies every time it's close to working. His voice cracked on that last word. Working. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. In the corner, Lina was mopping quietly. Her mother had been called early for a cleanup. Someone had spilled coffee during the chaos. The girl tried not to listen, but the sound of that frustration made her heart squeeze. She remembered the machine's faint heat the night before, that whisper of steam near its base. Something about it didn't sit right with her. When the shouting stopped, she whispered to her mother, Mama, can I ask you something? Maria sighed. Now? We're in the middle of... Please. Her tone was serious enough to make Maria pause. Okay. What? Lina pointed at the A9 engine, still lifeless under the harsh white lights. Last night, I saw steam near its lower vent. Do you think maybe it's overheating from the inside? Maria gave her a confused look. I don't know, Mija. That's not our job. But what if it's simple? Like something's blocking the air from moving? Maria chuckled softly. You sound like an engineer now. Lina smiled, but her eyes stayed fixed on the machine.
No.
I just listen. One of the engineers, Mark, overheard them and turned. Hey, you two shouldn't be here while we're running diagnostics. We're just cleaning, Maria said quickly. Mark's tone softened when he saw Lina's curious eyes. You seem interested. You like machines? She nodded. A little. I just think. Sometimes things stop working when they can't breathe. Mark frowned, half amused. Can't breathe? Like when a person's sick? Lina explained, her hands moving nervously. When you have fever, you don't shout at your body, you cool it down, right? Maybe the machine's just too hot. He smiled faintly. Cute theory. But trust me, kid. We've checked the cooling system 100 times. Lina looked down, embarrassed. Okay. Maria placed a hand on her shoulder. Come on, finish mopping. But as they walked away, something inside Lina refused to let go of the thought. Machines don't breathe, but they need air. If the air inside couldn't move, if something tiny was blocking it, maybe that's why it kept dying. That night, after the offices emptied, Lina stayed behind. Her mother had gone to collect supplies from another floor, and curiosity pulled her closer to the A9 engine. The room was silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy. She could hear the faint tick-tick of cooling metal. Carefully, she leaned closer to one of the vents. Warm air brushed her cheek. Too warm. She whispered to herself, You really are suffocating, aren't you? On the floor, she noticed something. A thin film of dust and lint built up near the lower fans. It wasn't much, but enough to block airflow. She knelt down, squinting under the metallic frame, and her heart raced. The cleaning staff weren't allowed to touch equipment, but she couldn't stop staring at it. That single layer of dust looked like the difference between life and failure. The door opened suddenly, her mother returned. Lina, what are you doing? Lina jumped back. Nothing, just looking. Maria sighed, shaking her head. You'll get us both fired if someone sees you near that thing. I know, Mama, but I think I know what's wrong. Her mother froze. Don't say that. You're not one of them. You're here to clean, not to fix. Lina stopped. There was no point arguing. In their world, knowing didn't matter if you weren't allowed to speak. But as she walked out, she looked back one last time. The flickering red light on the A9's base pulsed weakly, almost like it was asking for help. And for the first time, Lina made a silent promise to herself. If no one else listens, I will. She didn't know how or when, but somehow, she would find a way to prove it. Sometimes, the one without a degree sees what the experts can't, because they're not blinded by what they already know. By the end of that week, Atlas Tech was crumbling under pressure. The investors wanted answers, the media was whispering about bankruptcy, and the employees walked on eggshells. The A9 engine sat silent, a monument of failure worth millions. Richard Hale, the CEO, hadn't slept properly in 3 days. He stood in the conference room, staring at the frozen prototype, his reflection fractured in the glass. We're supposed to be the future, he muttered, and we can't even keep a machine alive for 10 minutes. His chief engineer, Mark, rubbed his temples. Sir, we've tried everything. Cooling systems, software patches, new processors. Nothing works. It just overheats and dies. Richard turned sharply. Then make it not overheat. It's not that simple, Mark said quietly. Richard laughed bitterly. It better become simple or we're finished. The tension in the room was like static. Every click of a pen, every sigh felt dangerous. Maria and Lina were quietly cleaning in the corner again, invisible as always. But this time, Lina wasn't looking at the floor. She was watching, listening. Richard paced the room, his expensive shoes echoing against the marble. You know what? Maybe we need to think differently, he said, frustration dripping from every word. Maybe we need someone from outside to fix it. Someone not buried in theory. One of the engineers scoffed. You mean like who? A miracle worker. Richard smirked. Maybe. His eyes landed on Lina, who had been standing by the door, holding a mop. She froze. Richard tilted his head slightly, sarcasm curling at his lips. What about you, kid? You've been staring at that machine all week. You think you can fix it? Everyone laughed softly, assuming it was a joke. Maria's face went pale. Sir, she's just... Richard raised a hand.
Relax. I'm kidding.
Obviously. He looked at Lina again, his tone mocking but curious. Still, what do you think's wrong with it? Lina swallowed hard. Her heart pounded. She wasn't sure if she should speak, but something in her chest refused to stay silent. I think it's choking, she said softly. The room fell quiet. Choking? Richard repeated, raising an eyebrow. Lina nodded. It's too hot. The air can't move inside. Maybe something's blocking the vents. A few engineers exchanged smirks. One whispered, That's adorable. Another said, We've checked that a dozen times. But Lina's voice didn't shake. Maybe you checked where the sensors told you to, not where the heat actually lives. Mark blinked. That was oddly specific. Richard crossed his arms. You think my team missed something that simple? She hesitated, then whispered, Sometimes simple things hide under pride. The words hit like a quiet thunder. Even her mother froze, her eyes wide. Richard studied her for a long second, amused yet strangely unsettled. Then he smirked. All right, genius. You fix it, and I'll give you $100 million. Laughter erupted around the room. Maria's hands trembled as she grabbed her daughter's arm. Lina, let's go. But Lina didn't move. She looked at the A9 engine, its faint red light still blinking weakly, like a dying heartbeat. Okay, she said. Richard stopped laughing. Excuse me? Lina stepped closer, her voice calm. I'll try. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. Mark frowned. Sir, we can't just let her. Richard waved a hand dismissively. Relax. If she breaks it, it's already broken. Maria whispered, Lina, please. But Lina didn't hear her. She was already kneeling by the machine, feeling the hum of its surface. Her fingers hovered near the vents. She could feel the warmth, the trapped air struggling to escape. Do you have a screwdriver? She asked quietly. The engineers hesitated. Mark handed her one, half mocking, half curious. Go ahead, Einstein. Lina smiled faintly. Thanks. As she removed the small metal panel, dust spilled out like gray snow. She coughed softly. Inside, the vents were choked with lint, the same kind that built up under office furniture over years. Nobody had noticed it. The sensors were too high, the cameras too far, and the engineers too proud to crawl under the frame. There it is, she whispered. She brushed it clean, then carefully reattached the cover. Try now. Richard frowned but nodded to Mark. Power it up. The machine hummed. Lights blinked. Then, for the first time in months, the A9 engine ran smoothly, no flicker, no heat surge, just the steady rhythm of perfection. The room went silent. Everyone stared. Lina stood up slowly, her small hands covered in dust. It just needed to breathe, she said softly.
Richard hale blinket, speechless.
Then, trying to hide his shock, he forced a smile. Well, I'll be damned. Maria stood frozen behind her mop, tears welling in her eyes. For the first time, everyone in that room looked at her daughter. Really looked at her, not as a cleaner's child, but as the person who solved what no expert could. For a few seconds, the room remained in stunned silence, as if no one dared breathe. The machine that had refused to work for 3 years was now running like a living thing. Its steady hum filled the air, soft and confident, like a long-lost melody rediscovered. Mark stared at the glowing monitor. Temperature levels, stable, he whispered. Power flow, normal. He turned toward Richard, disbelief written all over his face. It's fixed. Richard Hale took a slow step forward, his reflection shimmering across the silver surface of the A9 engine. No, he said softly, almost afraid to believe it. It can't be. But it was. The numbers on the screen danced in perfect rhythm. The once chaotic code now sang in harmony. What the world's brightest engineers couldn't stabilize. A girl with no degree, no title, no authority, had brought to life in a single, humble act of curiosity. Lina wiped her dusty hands on her jeans, her voice barely a whisper. Sometimes machines don't need more power. They just need air. Everyone was staring now. The engineers, who once saw her as invisible, looked at her like she was a miracle. Maria stood frozen near the doorway, tears slowly welling up in her eyes. "Mi hija," she whispered. "What did you just do?" Lina smiled softly. "I just listened." Richard exhaled, running a hand through his hair. He was a man used to control, to answers, to logic. But nothing about this moment fit any logic he knew. He looked at the girl, small, nervous, humble, and something inside him cracked. He laughed suddenly, loud and raw. "Unbelievable." Mark asked, "Sir, what should we do now?" Richard turned toward Lina, his eyes gleaming with both pride and embarrassment. "What we do," he said slowly, "is remember that genius doesn't always wear a suit." The room stayed quiet. Even the hum of the A9 seemed softer now, like it was listening. Maria walked up to her daughter, her voice trembling. "Lina, do you realize what this means?" Lina shook her head. "It means I can finally go home before midnight." Her mother laughed through tears, hugging her tightly. For years, they had cleaned up other people's messes, and now her daughter had cleaned up the one thing no one else could. But the story didn't end there. Word spread quickly through the company. By the next morning, every department knew. The CEO had mocked a maid's daughter, and she had fixed a $300 million invention in 10 minutes. Some laughed in disbelief. Others whispered it couldn't be true. But the truth was humming right there in the lab. When the media heard about the A9 miracle, reporters swarmed Atlas Tech. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed, and headlines screamed. "Teenage girl solves what scientists couldn't." CEO's Mockery turns to million-dollar applause. Richard Hale stood at the press conference, trying to stay composed. Lina stood beside her mother in borrowed clothes, a little too big for her frame, but her smile was small and sincere. A reporter asked, "Mr. Hale, is it true you promised the girl $100 million?" The room went silent. Cameras leaned closer. Richard chuckled awkwardly. That was a joke taken out of context. Lina looked down. She wasn't expecting the money. She never cared about that. But the crowd didn't laugh. The silence grew uncomfortable. Even Mark glanced away, ashamed. Another reporter pressed, "So she won't be rewarded for saving your company?" Richard's jaw tightened. He looked at Lina again, this time not as a CEO looking down, but as a man realizing how small he had been. The weight of his arrogance hit him. He sighed.
No.
"She will be." Gasps filled the room. Richard continued, his voice steady now. "Maybe not 100 million, but her value isn't in numbers. It's in perspective, something we lost chasing perfection. Lina Morales will be offered a full scholarship and a position at Atlas Tech, if she wants it." Lina blinked, stunned. "A scholarship?" He smiled faintly. "You fixed what we couldn't. I think it's only fair we make sure you have every chance to do it again." Maria covered her mouth with her hands, tears spilling freely. "Gracias, thank you." The applause that followed wasn't just for the machine. It was for the reminder that genius can bloom anywhere, even in the quiet corners of a room no one pays attention to. That day, the A9 engine didn't just start working. It changed everything. For Lina, for Maria, for Atlas Tech. The next morning, more Atlas Tech looked different. For the way the world felt lighter, people like them, and people spoke softer, almost with reverence. For the first time in years, the machine room wasn't filled with shouting. It was filled with quiet pride. And somewhere between the gleaming floors and the glowing screens, a girl who used to be invisible had become the center of everything. Lina arrived with her mother, still wearing her faded sneakers and a plain shirt. Cameras clicked instantly. Reporters turned, whispering her name like a legend that had come to life. "There she is. That's the girl who fixed it." Maria gripped her daughter's hand tightly. "Mija, are you okay?" Lina nodded nervously. "I feel like everyone's staring." Her mother smiled softly. They're finally seeing you. As they walked through the lobby, employees who used to pass by without a glance now stopped to greet her. Morning, Lina. You really saved us. Incredible job. Each compliment felt strange, almost unreal. The same people who once ignored her now spoke to her with awe. When they entered the lab, Richard Hale was already there, waiting. He had swapped his usual sharp arrogance for something humbler, softer around the edges. Good morning, Lina, he said, his voice sincere this time. Good morning, sir, she replied quietly. He gestured toward the A9 engine, now running perfectly. It's been 24 hours, and it hasn't crashed once. You really did it. She smiled faintly. It wasn't magic, just air. He chuckled. Sometimes the simplest truths are the hardest to see. Mark, the lead engineer, stepped forward. He looked embarrassed, his eyes heavy with guilt. Lina, I owe you an apology. We all do. You saw what none of us did because we were too proud to look. Lina shook her head gently. You were just looking too close. Sometimes you have to step back. Richard folded his arms, studying her. Do you realize, young lady, that you might have just saved hundreds of jobs? Maybe even this company? She shrugged lightly. I just didn't want to see my mom lose hers. That answer silenced the room. Maria's eyes filled with tears again, pride radiating from her like sunlight. Richard nodded slowly. That's a better reason than any of us had. After the meeting, Atlas Teca's PR team escorted Lina and Maria to the conference hall. Dozens of journalists waited inside. The lights were bright, blinding. On the large screen behind the stage, the words glowed in bold silver letters. The girl who fixed the future. Lina sat nervously beside her mother. She'd never been in front of cameras before. When Richard stepped onto the stage, the applause was thunderous. He raised a hand and said, Today isn't about me. It's about seeing brilliance where no one thought to look. Then he turned toward Lina. We often think innovation only lives in boardrooms, universities, or among people with long titles. But sometimes, it lives in the heart of a girl who refuses to stop wondering. The audience clapped again. Lina's hands trembled as Richard gestured for her to stand. Would you like to say something? He asked kindly. Her mother squeezed her hand. Go on, Mija. Lina took a shaky breath and stepped forward. The microphones seemed too close, the lights too bright. But then she remembered the night she first listened to the machine. The warmth, the hum, the quiet truth only she had noticed. I don't know much about science or engineering, she began softly. But I know what it's like to be ignored. And maybe that's why I saw something others didn't. Because when you're invisible, you learn to notice small things. The way air moves, the way people breathe, the way something feels when it's about to break. The room was silent. Not even the cameras clicked. She continued, her voice gaining strength. I didn't fix this because I'm smart. I fixed it because I cared. And I think, maybe that's what the world forgets sometimes, that caring is also intelligence. Her words hung in the air like music. For a moment, everyone in that room felt small. Not in a bad way, but in the way truth humbles you. Richard smiled gently, pride glinting in his eyes. You remind me of why I started this company, he said. Not to be the richest, but to build something that matters. Maria clapped first, tears spilling freely. Then the room followed. A wave of applause that felt endless. For the first time in her life, Lina didn't feel like the maid's daughter. She felt seen, heard, valued. As they left the stage, Maria whispered, Do you realize, Mija? The world finally sees you. Lina smiled through her tears. No, Mama. They finally see us. Fame comes fast. Faster than truth. Faster than fairness. Within days, the story of the maid's daughter who saved Atlas Tech spread across every platform. News channels ran the headline for weeks. Social media turned her into a symbol. The genius from nowhere. Everyone wanted an interview, a quote, a picture. But not everyone wanted her story for the right reasons. Lina found herself lost in a world that didn't feel like hers. Reporters camped outside their small apartment, shouting questions whenever she stepped out. How did you do it, Lina? What's next for you? Do you really think you're smarter than the engineers? She never answered. She didn't like how the questions made her feel. Like she was being used, not celebrated. At Atlas Tech, things changed too. The engineers treated her politely now, but it wasn't the same kind of respect. It was careful, distant. Like they admired her but wished she hadn't embarrassed them. Richard Hale, the CEO, stayed true to his word, at least for a while. A scholarship letter arrived with the company seal. Atlas Tech announced that Lina would study engineering, fully funded. Maria cried tears of joy, hugging her daughter tight. Mija, this is it. This is your chance to build a new life. Lina smiled, but part of her heart still felt uneasy. It feels too big, she said softly. Her mother brushed her hair back. Big dreams always do. But soon the world's attention moved on. The next big story came, a new invention, a scandal, something shinier. The reporters stopped coming. The cameras stopped flashing. And Richard Hale stopped calling. The scholarship paperwork got delayed, then postponed, then lost in process. The phone numbers changed. The secretary always said, "Mr. Hale is in a meeting." Maria called the office every week, her voice polite but desperate. "Please, sir, you promised my daughter. We're still working on it," they'd say. "Please be patient." Months passed. Lina waited, hope flickering like a candle in the wind. She didn't ask for the money, the fame, or the attention. All she wanted was the chance they promised. One afternoon, she and her mother stood outside the Atlas Tech building again. The same tall glass doors. The same reflection that once showed her as invisible. But this time, security stopped them before they could enter. "I'm sorry, ma'am," the guard said. "Only employees beyond this point." Maria frowned. "We just need to speak to Mr. Hale. He knows us." The guard checked his list.
I'm sorry.
"There's no meeting scheduled." Lina's heart sank. "He promised," she whispered. The guard's face softened, but rules were rules. "I know, but promises here." He hesitated, then sighed. "They don't always mean much." Maria thanked him and turned away, holding her daughter's hand tightly. They walked in silence. The world around them buzzed with traffic and noise, but inside, everything felt quiet, heavy. Maria finally spoke. "Mija, sometimes people forget their words when they no longer need you." Lina nodded, tears stinging her eyes. "I thought he was different." Her mother squeezed her hand. "He was, for a moment. That's all some people can manage. A moment." That night, Lina sat by the small window in their apartment, staring at the city lights. The same city that had once cheered her name now looked away. But she didn't feel angry, just disappointed. She thought about the machine, how it couldn't breathe because no one listened. Now she knew what that felt like too. Her mother entered quietly, setting a cup of tea beside her. "You know, Mija, the world may not give you what you deserve, but it can't take away what you already have." Lina looked up. "And what's that?" "Your gift," Maria said simply. "You see what others don't. Don't let their silence take that from you." Lina smiled faintly, her tears finally falling. "I won't, Mama. I'll build something one day. Something that listens to everyone." Maria kissed her forehead. "That's my girl." Outside, the city hummed. Alive, indifferent, beautiful. And somewhere in that vast world, the girl who once fixed a machine was learning a harder truth. That not all promises are kept, but dreams don't need permission to survive. Years passed quietly, like rain soaking into the earth, unnoticed but changing everything beneath the surface. After the world forgot her, Lina didn't stop. She couldn't. There was something inside her that wouldn't let go. The memory of that one moment when the machine came alive under her hands, when the room full of doubters had fallen silent, when she saw her mother's eyes fill with pride. That memory became her compass. But survival came first. Without the scholarship, Lina had to take whatever work she could find. She helped her mother clean houses, fixed broken appliances in the neighborhood, and sold small mechanical toys she built from scrap. People began to call her the fixer girl. Every night, after long days of work, She'd sit on the apartment floor surrounded by old circuit boards, wires, and screws. Her fingers were always rough, stained with grease, but her eyes still burned with quiet determination. Maria would watch her from the doorway. "Mija, you work too much." Lina would smile without looking up. "I have to. One day, I'll build something that makes life easier for people like us." The world around them was still unfair. Rent went up. The landlord's patience went down. Maria's health grew weaker, her coughs lasting longer each winter. But even then, she never stopped believing in her daughter. One evening, when the power went out across their neighborhood, Lina lit a candle and kept tinkering. The room flickered with golden light as she whispered to herself, "Machines shouldn't stop when the lights go out." Maria chuckled softly. "Neither should you." Lina smiled. "I learned that from you." Over the next few years, Lina began repairing old devices for free: radios, fans, even hospital monitors. She didn't care about money anymore. She wanted to learn, to understand, to keep moving forward. Word spread quietly, not through newspapers or TV, but through whispers and gratitude. "Go to Lina," people said. "She can fix anything." But deep down, she still carried a wound. The promise broken. The betrayal that taught her how fragile trust can be. Every time she held a wrench or soldering iron, she remembered Richard Hale's words echoing in her mind. "Fix this, and I'll give you $100 million. She didn't want his money anymore, but she did want the chance he took away. Years later, Lina built a small workshop behind their apartment. The walls were patched with metal sheets, and the air smelled of oil and dreams. Maria often sat in a chair nearby, wrapped in a shawl, watching her daughter work. One day, a man from the neighborhood brought in a broken wheelchair. "My son can't move without it," he said, his voice trembling. "The hospital can't fix it." Lina took it gently, her hands running over the frame. "Give me a few days." She worked through the night. The gears were jammed, the motor dead, the wiring corroded. But she saw something others didn't, a way to redesign it, make it lighter, faster, powered by simple rechargeable cells anyone could afford. When she handed it back, the boy's eyes lit up. He moved the wheels, and for the first time in months he smiled. "It works," he shouted. The father fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. "God bless you, child." Lina smiled softly. "No, sir. Just tell him to take care of it. Machines have feelings too." Word of her kindness spread quietly. Not like before, not loud and shiny, but in a way that mattered. Families began visiting her workshop. People who couldn't afford repairs came anyway, and she never turned them away. Maria often said, "You've become what that man could never be, someone who creates without needing applause." Lina didn't answer. She just worked, day after day, heart full of quiet pride and sadness. One night, Maria's cough got worse. Lina rushed to her side, holding her trembling hand. "Mama, please don't talk." Maria smiled weakly. "I'm proud of you, Mija. More than you'll ever know." "Don't say that," Lina whispered, tears falling. "I still need you." Maria reached up, touching her daughter's cheek. "You already have everything you need. It's all in here." She pressed a hand over Lina's heart. When Maria passed away that winter, the world felt colder, quieter. Lina buried her in a small cemetery on the edge of the city, next to a tree that swayed gently in the wind. She stood there for a long time, the sound of machines, promises, and memories echoing in her mind. "I'll make you proud, Mama," she whispered, "even if no one else remembers me." Then she went home and turned the lights back on in her workshop. That night, as rain fell outside, Lina drew the blueprint for her next invention. A power module that could run without electricity, using recycled kinetic energy. Something that could keep homes running when the city went dark. It was small, imperfect, but it was hers. And as she worked, she felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. The kind that doesn't come from fame or money. The kind that grows quietly in the dark and lights up everything around it. Years later, life had finally found its rhythm again. Lina was no longer the girl the news once chased. She was now a woman who built light from darkness. Her workshop had grown. The sign outside read, Lina's Repair and Innovations. It wasn't fancy, but everyone in the neighborhood knew her name. Children brought their broken toys. Mechanics came for advice. Families thanked her for saving their appliances when they couldn't afford new ones. She didn't make much money, but she made something better, meaning. Then one morning, everything changed. It started with the sound of an expensive car engine stopping outside. Lina looked up from her workbench, surprised. A sleek black vehicle, shining like oil in sunlight, parked in front of her workshop. Two men in suits stepped out, followed by someone she never thought she'd see again.
Richard Hale.
Time had aged him, silver streaks in his hair, lines around his eyes, but his presence was still sharp, commanding. He stepped into the small workshop, looking strangely out of place among the rust, metal, and wires. Lina froze, the screwdriver slipping from her fingers. "Miss Torres," he said quietly, removing his sunglasses. "It's been a long time." Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. 10 years, Mr. Hale." He nodded slowly. "Yes, 10 long years." There was a silence heavy enough to feel, the kind that carries too many memories. He looked around, eyes scanning the humble space. "You've done well for yourself." Lina wiped her hands on a rag. "Not as well as someone who runs Atlas Tech." A flicker of guilt crossed his face, but only for a second. "I deserve that," he said softly. "I came to see you because I owe you an apology." She folded her arms, her expression unreadable. "You owe me a lot more than that." He took a deep breath. "You're right. I broke my promise. I should have made sure your scholarship went through. I should have followed up." "Should have," she said bitterly. "That's a word people use when it's too late." He lowered his head. "You're not wrong." Lina turned back to her table, picking up a half-fixed generator. "Why are you here, really? To ease your conscience." He hesitated. "Partly, but also because we need your help again." She laughed. Not cruelly, but in disbelief. "You're joking." "I wish I were," he replied. "Atlas Tech is facing another failure. A new energy system, the one that was supposed to revolutionize sustainable power, it doesn't work. The world is watching us fall apart. Investors are leaving. We're desperate." Lina didn't even look up. "And you think the maid's daughter can save you again?" Richard sighed. "I think the genius who once saw what no one else could still can." The room fell silent again. Dust floated through the sunlight like slow-moving stars. Finally, she turned to face him. "Do you even hear yourself? You had everything: money, power, the brightest minds in the world. And you still broke a promise to a teenage girl who fixed what your billion-dollar company couldn't." He nodded. "You're right. I failed you." "Not just me," she said softly. "You failed what you stood for." For the first time, he had no answer. After a long pause, he said, "I can't undo what happened, but I can make it right now. Come back to Atlas Tech. Lead our team. Name your price." Lina looked at him for a long moment, then shook her head. "You still think it's about money?" Richard frowned. "Then what is it about?" She took a deep breath. "It's about trust, about keeping your word, about not using people when it's convenient." He looked genuinely regretful. "I'm trying to change that." "Then start by apologizing to my mother," Lina said quietly. Richard's face fell. "I didn't know." "She's gone," Lina whispered. "She died waiting for that call you never made." The silence that followed was unbearable. The hum of the machines, the ticking of the clock. Even the air seemed to hold its breath. Richard's voice broke when he finally spoke.
"I'm sorry, Lina."
She looked at him, not with anger, but with the calm of someone who had already forgiven the world in order to move on. "Sorry doesn't fix what's broken, Mr. Hale, but it's a start." He nodded, eyes wet. "Then let me at least give you the chance I promised. Not out of pity, but because you've earned it 10 times over." Lina stared at him for a long time, thinking of her mother, of that old factory, of every night she spent rebuilding broken things. Finally, she said softly, If I help you, it'll be on my terms. No board meetings.
No reporters.
Just the work. Richard nodded eagerly. Anything you need. She extended her hand. Then let's see if your company still remembers how to listen. He shook her hand, the same hand that once brought his empire back from the edge. And for the first time in years, Lina felt something shift. Not trust, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, a second chance. The next morning, Lina stood once again inside the towering glass building of Atlas Tech, the same place where years ago, she had walked behind her mother with a mop bucket. The smell of polished marble and fresh coffee hit her like a memory. Everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. This time, she didn't wear her mother's cleaning uniform. She wore a plain gray coat, her hair tied back neatly, a small notebook in hand. People watched as she passed, whispering, curious, unsure. Some recognized her. Others just sensed something different about her calm confidence. Richard Hale walked beside her, quieter than before. The team's waiting for you, he said. I'm not here to lead your team, she replied softly. I'm here to fix a problem. They entered the innovation lab, sleek, full of glowing panels, robotic arms, and engineers staring at screens filled with red error codes. The room went silent as Lina stepped in. Someone whispered, "That's her. The girl from the story." Lina ignored the murmurs. Her eyes locked onto the massive cylindrical device at the center, the Helios reactor, Atlas Tech's dream of infinite clean energy. It was beautiful, but something about it felt wrong. She walked around it slowly, tracing the machine's lines with her eyes. "What's it supposed to do?" she asked. Richard explained. "It converts thermal waste into renewable energy, but it keeps overheating and shutting down." "Sounds familiar," she said quietly. The chief engineer frowned. "We've run over 1,000 simulations. Nothing works." Lina knelt down beside the core chamber, her fingers brushing against the metal surface. It was warm, too warm. "You're trying to control power," she murmured. "But you forgot to let it breathe." The engineer looked confused. "Breathe? It's a machine." Lina looked up, her eyes steady. "So was the last one I fixed." Hours passed. She worked silently, asking for tools no one had used in years, analog gauges, thermal valves, manual control levers. The engineers watched as she rewired sections of the machine, adjusting circuits with the patience of someone who understood not just how things worked, but why they stopped working. Richard stood nearby, watching every move. There was no arrogance left in him, only quiet respect. At one point, she paused and whispered to herself, "Machines are like people. They shut down when no one listens." The room stayed still. Finally, after a long stretch of silence, she stepped back and said, "Try it now." The engineer hesitated. "You're sure?" Lina nodded. He pressed the ignition. The machine hummed softly, its lights flickering, then glowing brighter. Steady, rhythmic, alive. The energy readings on the screens stabilized for the first time in months. "It's holding," someone shouted. It's working," another engineer cried, staring at the data in disbelief. The room erupted into cheers. For a moment it felt like history repeating, but this time on her terms. Lina didn't smile right away. She just watched the Helios reactor, calm and glowing, as if she was listening to its heartbeat. Then she whispered, "You're free now." Richard approached her slowly, emotion tightening his voice. "Lina, you did it. Again." She looked at him, her expression quiet but kind. "No, Mr. Hale. We did it because you finally listened." He nodded, swallowing hard. "You've earned more than money can offer. But I still owe you something." She shook her head. "You don't owe me. You owe the people who believe someone like me could never stand here." He hesitated. "Then let me do this for them." He called a press conference that evening. Cameras, reporters, flashes, all the noise of the world returning. But this time, Lina wasn't standing in the background. Richard stepped to the podium. His voice was steady but full of humility. "Years ago, I made a promise I didn't keep. I mocked someone who saw what I couldn't. Today, that same person has saved Atlas Tech, and maybe our planet, again." He turned to her. Lina Torres, this company owes you everything. And as promised, the $100 million reward is yours. Gasps filled the room. Lina took a slow breath, then stepped forward to the microphone. The world waited for her words. I don't want your money, she said softly. Money breaks when hearts do. I want something better. Reporters leaned forward. Then what do you want? One asked. Lina smiled faintly. I want Atlas Tech to build a school. A place where kids like me can learn, invent, and dream. For every maid's daughter, every mechanic's son. Every child who looks at broken things and wonders how to make them whole again. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the room filled with applause. Not polite, but real, thunderous, human. Richard looked at her with tears in his eyes. You've taught me more than any boardroom ever could. Lina turned to him and said quietly, Then don't forget this time. Later that night, she returned home to her small workshop. The same wooden chair, the same quiet hum of tools, the same candle burning softly by her mother's photo. She placed the newspaper from that day on the table. The headline read, The Maid's Daughter Builds a Future for Millions. She looked at the photo of her mother and smiled. We did it, Mama. Not for them, but for us. Then she turned off the light, leaving only the glow of her inventions. Small sparks of hope in a world that had once doubted her. Because sometimes, the richest reward isn't the money you're promised, but the life you build when no one's watching.